Because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1. Local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app for free.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg. At noon, it's currently 20 downtown under a mostly cloudy sky. Mostly cloudy and 17 in Brandon, cloudy and 9 this hour in Thompson. The forensic psychiatrist hired by Jeremy Skibitsky's defense team testified in court again today. Skibitsky faces 4 first-degree murder charges in the deaths of 4 women. CBC's Cameron McLean reports.
Dr. Shahom Das told the court he has assessed Jeremy Skibitsky twice and diagnosed him with schizophrenia. Skibitsky's defense lawyer asked Das to go over Skibitsky's medical history. He documented a history of hearing voices since he was a teenager. The psychiatrist from the UK said during his interviews with Skibitsky, he showed signs of paranoia, racism, and grandiose delusions. He believed he was acting on the wishes of God when he killed 4 women. In the assessment, Skibitsky told Das the women were impure, and by killing them, he might help them go to heaven. Even though he knew it was legally wrong, Skibitsky felt compelled to do it. Das says his conclusion is that Skibitsky's delusional beliefs were genuine and motivated him to kill. Skibitsky pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. His defense argues he is not criminally responsible due to mental illness. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The man responsible for revitalizing the Royal Albert Arms is taking on the Sherbrooke Inn. Neil Sorsma purchased the West Broadway building in mid-May. The bar and beer vendor had a reputation for being a rough place. The former owners closed them earlier this year. Sorsma says 20 of the 33 suites are occupied and he has no plans to evict the tenants. He says the area is in the midst of being revitalized and is named in the Broke Backpacker Guide to Winnipeg.
One of the coolest new areas of Winnipeg, along with the Exchange, which is where the Albert is, lucky me. So, there's a real nucleus of growth in the area, and we're hoping to tap into that and be part of fueling it.
Sorsma says one day he'd like to see the Sherbrooke return to being a hotel, but says for now he'd like to fill the affordable housing void. City councillors responsible for property decisions have endorsed a plan to expand West Kildonan Library when money becomes available. The city abandoned a plan 2 years ago to knock down the library. A new study found it will cost up to $11 million to modernize and expand it. Council's property committee voted this morning to endorse that plan by adding the West K Library to a list of future projects. Federal cabinet ministers say they are concerned by the latest report on foreign interference. It comes from the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians and suggests some MPs are knowingly helping foreign governments meddle in Canadian politics. Karina Roman has more.
Obviously, the allegations contained in the report are extremely serious.
And Housing Minister Sean Fraser says they should be investigated by Canadian law enforcement. If charges were to result, that's when names of alleged culprits could be revealed. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says Canadians should not be naive.
One of the objectives of authoritarians around the world is to undermine democracies.
The NSICOP report gives examples, but no names, of MPs working to influence their colleagues on India's behalf, and parliamentarians providing confidential information to Chinese officials. The Liberals' recently introduced Bill C-70 is aimed at combating foreign interference. The Conservatives have offered to help fast-track it, so it can be in place before the next election. Karina Roman, CBC News, Ottawa.
A Northern Ontario First Nation is launching a lawsuit against that province and the federal government. The legal action follows a report commissioned by Grassy Narrows First Nation. It found that mercury dumped in local waterways decades ago continues to endanger the health and livelihoods of its people. Here's Chief Rudy Turtle.
There's a new generation of young people that are being born every day and they are being born to a contaminated river, and our economy's been destroyed. Our way of life has been destroyed.
The First Nation wants compensation from Ontario and Canada for damages caused and also an end to ongoing poisoning. In what appears to be a move aimed at voters concerned about immigration, U.S. President Joe Biden is making changes to the rules governing migrants seeking asylum at America's southern border. Richard Madden has more from Washington.
This appears to be a major policy change from the White House and a political 180 for President Joe Biden. So he's expected to sign an executive order that would temporarily shut down asylum seekers entering the southern border, using the same powers he once denounced that were used by his predecessor, former President Donald Trump. Now, under this plan, U.S. immigration officials can deport migrants without processing their asylum claims once illegal crossings exceed roughly 3,000 per day. Claims would then reopen when that number falls. Now, officials caution details are still being finalized, but this appears to be a recognition that Biden's handling of the border has become a major liability with voters, while being a rallying cry for his opponent, Donald Trump. So Biden's campaign is looking to show that they're taking action ahead of the first presidential debate, which happens about 3 weeks from now. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 12:30. For news anytime, you can always head to cbc.ca/Manitoba or download the free CBC News app.
Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining us today for Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on YouTube or your CBC Listen app or your CBC News app. Truly everywhere. My name is Janet Stewart, and I'm grateful to have your company today. Today we're going to talk about heart and stroke. We're going to ask if you know the signs of a stroke. In our calling conversation, we want to know how your life has been impacted by heart disease and stroke. We're going to talk to the mayor of Thompson, Colleen Smook, about the impact on safety in her city, being that the RCMP is down so many members from that detachment. But as I mentioned, we start today with heart and stroke. Our first guest today is not somebody that you'd imagine would be a stroke survivor. It's been 10 years since Heart and Stroke, what we used to call the Heart and Stroke Foundation, started its FAST awareness campaign to teach us the most common signs of someone having a stroke. FAST is an acronym for face, is it drooping? Arms, can you raise both? Speech, is it slurred or jumbled? And time to call 911 right away. Heart and Stroke released results this morning of recent polling. Its surveys show roughly 3 in 10 of us still can't name any of those 2 signs, the common signs of stroke. Katrina Rogan survived a stroke less than 2 years ago when she was just 20 years old. Thank you for joining us by Zoom today, Katrina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you aren't the person we picture when we imagine a stereotypical stroke survivor, if there is such a thing. You were so young when it happened, you still are, and so fit. A university basketball player. Before this happened to you, was heart disease a concern?
Not at all. I wasn't even aware that it could happen to someone so young.
So take us back to that day in October 2022. Do you remember what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was studying for my university stats exam, and I had heard my dog rummaging around in something downstairs. So I just ran downstairs to make sure everything was fine. And when I came upstairs, I kind of had felt a bit winded and something felt a bit off. But like you had mentioned, I was a university athlete. So it was a little alarming how just running down the stairs had winded me so bad. And so I was studying with my dad. He was helping to tutor me, and he had mentioned that I should just put my head down for a little bit. So I put my head down, and then that's when I knew something was really wrong. I wasn't able to lift my head back up to alert him that something was wrong.
That must have been so scary.
It was not a good feeling. So I was able to kick the table leg, which got his attention. And so he lifted my head up, and immediately he saw that something was wrong. He knew something was wrong. And within 5 to 10 seconds, he was on the phone calling 911. And within 5 to 10 minutes, the paramedics and fire trucks were here assessing me. And then they had taken me to HSC, and they declared that I was indeed having a stroke.
Your dad was there, thank heavens. And he knew the sign of your face, one half of your face drooping, that was a sign of stroke.
So that's actually a very interesting story, and plays a huge role in why I am in such good condition today, is because at his work, there's a fast poster that's posted right above their coffee maker. And so every day when he's making his coffee, he was reading the fast poster. And so then when his 20-year-old daughter was having a stroke, he knew instantly, because he had read that sign every single day while he was at work waiting for his coffee. And that's how he knew that I was having a stroke, and why he was able to save my life was because he read that sign every single day. And he knew the second he saw what my face looked like that he needed to call for help.
So when you hear the survey results that most of us in Manitoba, most of us in Canada do not know the signs of a stroke, how do you feel?
It is very scary, because I just know if my dad didn't know those signs, I may not be here today. The fast poster that he read every single day is what saved my life.
It turns out you had a small hole in your heart. And if I understand correctly, doctors say that's what led to your stroke.
Yeah.
You've had surgery to correct that hole. What's been it like for you? What's it been like to go through all this?
So it was definitely scary. I remained in university classes the whole entire time. I took an exam online. I was taking all my exams online. I took one at the end of my hospital stay, and I took the rest online. I stayed in classes the whole time. I actually wrote my final December 19th from 6 to 9 p.m. and then went into heart surgery December 20th at 5 a.m. So there was a 10-hour difference between writing my last final and going in for my heart surgery. Ever since I've had the heart surgery, I haven't had any other scares with my health. I've been back to living a very healthy life, going to the gym, staying active. I'm no longer able to play basketball, but I do still coach for the high school that I attended, Vincent Massey Collegiate. So I am still staying in the basketball world and trying to give back in every way I can.
Including by sharing your story.
Yeah.
Why is it important for you to do that?
It's so important for me to share my story because up until October 20th, 2022, I didn't know that it could happen to someone my age. And I also didn't know the signs of a stroke or what fast meant. So it's so important to me to be able to share my story. And I always said, my dad was with me for a reason when I had my stroke, and he knew the signs. I was meant to stay on this earth for a reason, and that maybe to help educate people. So I am doing everything I can to help raise awareness and get fast out there and let people know that it can happen at any age, no matter how healthy you are. I was a university athlete. I took care of my health my whole life, and it still happened.
So remind us once again, what does that acronym FAST, what do the letters stand for?
So F stands for face. Is it drooping? A stands for arms, if you're able to raise them both. S stands for speech, and T stands for time, and time meaning it's time to call 911.
You had a final right before you had heart surgery. How'd you do in that final?
Yeah. I didn't do probably as best as I had wanted, but I got a decent grade. I was able to pass the course. And that's honestly all I could ask for, because I do know a lot of people were encouraging me that maybe I should take some time away from school and focus just on getting my health back to where it should be. But I felt that I could be in school and get my health back at the same time. And I'm just grateful that I was honestly able to write a final. That was a huge takeaway. I I used to get very stressed out about finals and very stressed about school, but then I came to realize being able to attend school and write exams is such an honor when you don't know, like when you're laying in that hospital bed, never knowing if you're going to be able to go back to school. Honestly, all I wanted to do was be able to write that final, and I was able to do it.
And you did it. And so do you have you noticed a shift in the things that stress you out?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I used to get stressed out over the simplest things, and now I've kind of realized like it's honestly an honor just to be able to wake up every day and walk, climb stairs, eat food.
Katrina Rogan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Katrina Rogan is a Manitoban who survived a stroke less than 2 years ago. It happened when she was just 20 years old.
Your local news at your fingertips.
CBC News has a local news app made for your phone or tablet.
So don't waste time scrolling for the local stories you want. Just download the app to get the information that matters to you when it happens.
And how you want it.
Another way to get your local news. The CBC News app. Download it today.
It's 12:15. I'm Janet Stewart, and you're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. Now stay with Radio Noon. We just heard from Katrina Rogan. Today, our call-in conversation topic is how has your life been impacted by heart disease or stroke? We just heard how it changed Katrina's life. What has it meant for yours? Our special guest today is a stroke neurologist who actually came to Manitoba just over a year ago from Alberta to accept a brand new research position. Hear what difference that research is making after our 12:30 news and weather. Help wanted. The RCMP detachment in Thompson is hiring. We'll hear from the mayor of Thompson about efforts to improve the sense of safety in Manitoba's northern capital and potentially cut down on officer burnout. Right now, let's take a quick look at your weather forecast. We've got some sunny breaks happening in Winnipeg today, with a good chance we'll also see some showers scattered here and there, lingering. There's a chance of a thunderstorm again today as well. Our high temperature in Winnipeg will be 22 degrees, and again, it's breezy out there. Southeast wind with gusts from 30 to 50. Mainly sunny tomorrow morning, increasing clouds in the afternoon, and scattered showers. Scattered showers in the evening Wednesday as well. 21 degrees our high tomorrow. A sun-cloud mix for your Thursday. Riley Lachuk will be in after the 12:30 news with more on our Manitoba forecast. Well, as you likely have been hearing in the news today, if you've been listening to CBC Radio, the RCMP detachment in Manitoba's biggest northern city, our northern capital, in effect, has 13 vacancies. That's according to a policing report presented to Thompson Mayor and Council last month. The current vacancies include 4 administrative positions, an inspector, a staff sergeant, and 7 constables. CBC's Jenna Dulowich sat down with Colleen Smook, the mayor of Thompson, to talk about the impact this has had on safety in the city.
The city of Thompson, we have the largest RCMP contingent in the province per capita. We have 38 RCMP members for local, plus we have a detachment for outlying communities and that. So the resources are there. We do need to get the numbers back to capacity for the RCMP. We're also looking at different ways that our Thompson Fire and Emergency Services, are maxed out with the number of calls that we get. So we're looking at different ways to respond to them and how can we change the focus. And we've been really lucky that with the government over the last few years, they've realized that and are giving us the resources now that we can move on. Where at one time we seemed to struggle and not get any help. We're definitely getting more help now to get this on. And of course, with that being said, we're getting more people into town. So it's definitely something that we have to deal with. I've actually, going to be setting up meetings with the Grand Chiefs and that over the next few weeks here, and see what we can do as a group to help the people. And what happens is in the communities, they don't always have the resources they need if they have, issues in that. So then those people are either sent out of the community or they leave the community, and then Thompson's just, we're the next stop. We're the biggest, populated, So our 13,000 people, that is a normal census, is likely we're never 13,000. We're likely more, 15,000 on average, likely closer to 20,000 on some weekends when we have activities in town here. So that's a big jump for our RCMP and our community to handle. When you're down 13, members between staff and office workers, it just means there's a lot more overtime. It's a lot more burnout. We go through more members that, just go to other places because it's less of a workload. But in general, the RCMP are having trouble filling spots right across Canada. That we definitely have vacancies that we work with.
So what is Thompson doing to help attract or build capacity in all the sectors?
Okay, so we have what we call Community Wellbeing and Safety Plan, and this is one of the last years, but there's 5 pillars in it, and that is to bring in. The issue is that many times the RCMP are the first ones that are being called, when in fact they, there's other places, whether it be probations, whether it be for missing children, maybe CFS, different organizations in the community that should be called and that, but all positions are lacking down, so then it all falls on the RCMP. So what our hope is in that we have the Wellbriety Center now that is just, we're getting up and running. The programming isn't there yet, but we're hoping to take the demand off the RCMP and some of the other agencies by getting more agencies involved at the beginning of people's lives, getting into the schools and, educating the children younger and that on how they can help, even the adults at home in that cope and get a better life.
And there's a lot of aspects that go into that. Like you're saying, RCMP shouldn't always be the first call. When will programming start at the center? Do you know?
It has started. They're basically, most of it's, they've got architects in there working on what they want. The second floor of the center is under renovations. It should be pretty soon done, and it will be more about women's shelter and that. And then the sobriety center, which will pick up people that are inebriated, IPDAs, Intoxicated Persons Detention Act, and they're really not a danger to society or anything. They just need a place to sober up and sleep it off and somebody to watch them. So there's going to be rooms there for them to be able to take rather than go to the cells in the RCMP. So that definitely will take a burden off the RCMP when we get that section of it up and running. Then there's going to be different medical help, intervention at the center and that. There's even a van that's going to go around and, help, with the people on the street and see what the needs are. And so I think everything coming together will definitely benefit our unsheltered people, plus the RCMP, plus the staff that are trying to work with them.
Do you have timelines for the sobering center and the van to be up and running?
We do, and it started out a couple years ago, and we basically opened it up maybe a bit prematurely because it was October. We were scared of people freezing, and nowadays we haven't lost anybody froze to death, since we opened it as such. So that got people off the street, but now the next thing is getting people to be able to move on to transition into the next level of their lives and to look after the ones. So basically it's a work in progress, and it had sort of stalled. We changed organizations running it, so just a change of direction. And so that's that took, sort of lost 6 months in there. So we're back at it heavy duty, and the community safety well-being group and that is just starting to meet back again after the winter hiatus and that. So I'm really hoping that, by this fall, a lot of the renovations will be done, and you'll see a difference in how we're able to help people.
That's Thompson Mayor Colleen Smook speaking with CBC's Jenna Dulowich.
Angeline Tadaweo hosts The Block.
Afrobeats to jazz, hip-hop to R&B, calypso, Kez the Band, Michelle Montano, Bob Marley, Bounty Killer. So we really give all these artists a chance to shine, and the key is in the programming, in making it make sense, and making sure that the music is fluid, a fluid experience.
The Block with Angeline Tadaweo. Available now on CBC Listen.
Manitoba's Romy Mays is back after a 9-year musical hiatus. She's one of the headliners of the second annual Gimli Blues Festival being held this weekend. Romy began writing her new single, the one you're just about to hear, while touring back in 2010. Now it's the lead single on her upcoming album, Small Victories. Here's new music from Romy Mays. This is Come On, Baby.
Come on, baby, where are you going? Where are you going? I'm sitting right here. Come on, baby, where are you going? Where are you going? I'm sitting right here. You got me losing my mind, got me wasting my time. You got me losing my hair, I ain't going nowhere. Everybody wants you, but I'm the one that needs you. Everybody wants you, but I'm the one that feeds you. Come on, baby, you know it's alright to. Yes, it's alright to. Come over here. Come on, baby, you know I won't bite you. No, I won't bite you if you come near. You got me losing my mind, got me wasting my time. You got me losing my hair, I ain't going nowhere. Everybody wants you, but I'm the one that needs you. Everybody wants you, but I'm the one that feeds you. Everybody wants you, but I'm the one that teases you. Everybody wants you, but I'm the one that pleases you.
Romy Mays with Come On, Baby. She'll perform Friday night at 10 at the Gimli Park Pavilion, part of the second annual Gimli Blues Festival on this weekend. Romy Mays' album, Small Victories, comes out June 28th. It is 12:29. In just a minute, we'll be opening our phone lines for our call-in conversation today. We want to know how your life has been touched by heart disease and stroke. First, we have a little bit of news and announcement from the government, from the NDP caucus. They want you to know that royal assent has been given to 3 bills brought forward by NDP MLA. One is Nellie Kennedy. She has moved, and it is now law, that October will be Islamic Heritage Month here in Manitoba. Logan Oxenham brought forward Bill 208, the Two-Spirit and Transgender Day of Visibility Act. That recognizes March 31st as a day to celebrate the existence of Two-Spirit and Transgender Manitobans. That has also received royal assent. And Jennifer Chen brought forward Bill 212, which is the Asian Heritage Month Act, recognizing May as a month to celebrate Asian Canadians in Manitoba. 204-780-0893 is the number to call to join our call-in conversation. How has heart disease and stroke impacted your life? Now it's time for the news.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg at 12:30. It's currently 21 downtown under a mostly cloudy sky, mostly cloudy and 18 in Dauphin, cloudy and light rain in the Paw. A forensic psychiatrist from the United Kingdom told court this morning that admitted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky has schizophrenia. That diagnosis was made following 2 assessments by Dr. Shahom Das, one in late 2022 and again earlier this year. Dr. Das also testified about Skibitsky's medical history and child welfare files, saying he had episodes of aggression and self-harm. Some dated back to when he was a teenager. Court heard he was also abused by his parents. This afternoon, Dr. Das is expected to give details of his assessment of Skibitsky's mental state. Skibitsky has pleaded not guilty in the deaths of Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and an unidentified woman given the name Mushkade Bishake Ikwe Ibon. His defense team is arguing he's not criminally responsible due to mental disorder. The provincial government is giving Manitoba's only mobile overdose prevention site some financial stability. Sunshine House will receive $589,000 for the prevention site, which it operates out of a converted RV. The money will cover its operations for the rest of this fiscal year. Levi Foy at Sunshine House expects the RV's role will shift once a dedicated supervised consumption site opens in Winnipeg in 2025.
We're really hopeful that with a dedicated supervised consumption site, it'll still allow us to provide services elsewhere in the city and then really kind of help communities and neighborhoods determine what their needs are going to be in the future around supervised consumption services.
The Sunshine House RV currently offers a safe space for people in Winnipeg's core area to use substances, supervised by staff trained in overdose response. It also distributes harm reduction supplies and tests drugs. Auditor General Karen Hogan says the RCMP and other security agencies do not have the capacity to effectively police cybercrime, in part because they don't talk to each other.
Part of the issue is the federal government's siloed and disconnected approach. We found breakdowns in response, coordination, tracking, and information sharing between and across the responsible organizations.
Only 5 to 10% of cybercrimes are actually reported to police. Canadians have lost more than $500 million to cyber fraud in 2022. Hogan warns if nothing's done, those losses will only grow as cybercrime continues to rise. And Winnipeg motorists could soon drive a few blocks over Bachman-Turner Overdrive. City Council's Property Committee voted today to have city staff consider an honorary renaming of a portion of Disraeli Freeway. Disraeli from Main Street to the Disraeli Bridge could become Bachman-Turner Overdrive. The honorary name would remain for up to 5 years. Another council vote, is required on this because Disraeli is a regional street. And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 1:30.
Oh, Josh Crabb, that made me so laugh.
I could see that you were enjoying that.
I cannot wait to drive over the Overdrive.
Yes, the Overdrive.
Thank you very much.
Fitting.
Josh Crabb
You're welcome.
covering our news desk for us today here on CBC Radio 1 in Manitoba. Riley Lachuk is our weather specialist. Great to have you back, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
How's it looking out there?
What?
Yes, it is.
I'm working on crunching some numbers for CBC Winnipeg News tonight.
Do the numbers still crunch, or are they too soggy?
They're very soggy.
More like a smush, more like a wringing out of the numbers?
That's what we're looking at. And more rain on the way, Janet, especially if you're in eastern Manitoba into northwestern Ontario. We'll get right into that because we do have a tornado watch in place for northwestern Ontario. Kenora through Rainy River, Fort Francis, the Dryden area, looking at the risk of some tornadoes in isolated thunderstorms throughout the afternoon. So we're looking at a line of storms moving through northwestern Ontario. Wind gusts to 100 kilometers an hour, heavy downpours, up to nickel-size hail, and yes, that risk of an isolated tornado this afternoon as we see that line of instability kind of make its way through the region. Right now, satellite radar is showing some heavier pockets of rain down into southeastern Manitoba, the heaviest of which, though, moving along that Highway 17 corridor between Kenora and Dryden right now. So if you're heading east into northwestern Ontario, you're likely going to hit some pretty heavy downpours between Kenora and the Dryden region as we head through the next few hours here. And we're looking at some of that instability kind of sticking around as we get through the next few hours. A lot of that, though, is starting to make its way further to the north, where areas of northern Manitoba will start to get a little bit more in the way of rainfall as we get through the next couple of days. As mentioned, the rain has pretty much tapered off through the Westman region, through the Winnipeg region. Still some scattered showers, though, through extreme southern Manitoba as we head into the afternoon. Looking at that energy for thunderstorms Cape, which is a forecast modeling that takes into account a number of different factors, showing us the greatest potential, I guess, or regions of potential for thunderstorm activity through the afternoon hours. Most of that, yes, is centered through that Kenora, Dryden, Fort Francis region, but the risk we could see an isolated thunderstorm persists here into the Red River Valley as we get through the later afternoon, evening hours tonight, and again, a slight risk through the afternoon tomorrow here in the Winnipeg region that we could see some thunderstorms. So quickly looking at what's ahead the next couple of days, wet conditions persisting through northwestern Ontario, maybe some scattered showers through the day tomorrow here in the Red River Valley, but that main area of low pressure spins its way north and brings Churchill, the Thompson region, Lynn Lake, Brochet, some pretty wet conditions. So we're looking here, at least in the Red River Valley, only a couple of millimeters over the next couple of days or so, but places like Dryden, Fort Francis could see up to 40 millimeters of rain in some of these thunderstorms. The north, looking at some pretty significant rainfall as well, up to 50 or 60 millimeters in the Churchill-Gillam regions. 40 is what I've got for Thompson over the next couple of days. Looking at highs of 21, 22 across the Red River Valley today, and we're looking at temperatures staying fairly seasonal over the next 5 days. Once we get through tomorrow, Janet, we're looking at temperatures back to the low 20s and more sunshine returning as well. You're welcome. Lots to talk about today.
Keep us posted on that tornado watch,
sounds
please.
good.
Riley Lachuk is our weather specialist here at CBC Manitoba. He'll be back during Up to Speed today between 3 and 6. Of course, we'll let you know if there's anything urgent you need to know in terms of safety. Stay with CBC Radio 1. It is time now for our call-in conversation. Our question is one that you likely can relate to. Share our story because this is something that needs a human face. How has your life been impacted by heart disease or stroke? I know my life has been impacted by them both. My mother had her first major heart attack when I was 8 years old. She was very, very young. Heart disease is something that my family lives with. What about yours? 204-780-083 0893. It's just like the frequency for the radio station, 204-780-0893. And you can share your story, join our conversation. Our guest today is Dr. Nishita Singh. She is the research chair in neurological stroke at the University of Manitoba. Thank you so much by joining us today by Zoom, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Jen. It's my pleasure to be here.
First of all, your reaction to Heart and Stroke's findings that most of us can't name the most common signs of stroke.
Yeah, so it is quite alarming, right? Like stroke is, as most of us know, is a deadly disabling disease, one of the leading causes of such worldwide. And Heart and Stroke has done a phenomenal job in trying to raise awareness for stroke across the country by the FAST campaign, which essentially is, speaking of signs to pick up stroke. And part of the campaign was to find out the number of people who understand these signs of stroke, and there is work to be done. So the campaign was launched around 10 years ago, where we had our numbers were much lower in terms of awareness, staggering around 30% across the country. And right now, 10 years since, we've made progress up to 44%. But there is clearly work to be done. To add a Manitoba context, we are doing comparatively better compared to the nation, sitting at 57% people who actually recognize at least 2 signs of the FAST campaign. But as I said, we still have ways to go ahead, and it is incredibly important that people understand awareness, stroke awareness, because ultimately it is losing 1.9 billion neurons per minute lost in delay to getting to the hospital.
Sorry, 1.9 million neurons?
Billion neurons.
Billions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Time is brain, and I cannot stress that further.
Okay. Time is brain. Okay, Manitoba, help us put a human face on this. Share how your life's been impacted by stroke or by heart disease. 204-780-0893. Our toll-free number is 1-800-268-5483. Help us understand that staggering number of neurons, Dr. Singh. In medical terms, we can all understand what happens and why is it so important that someone having a stroke get treatment quickly?
Oh, great question, Janet, there. And the part of, the reason why we need to create this awareness, and it becomes more and more important as we lose time, is there is treatment. There is treatment available. So if folks who develop and recognize signs and symptoms of stroke end up, calling 911 and reach to the emergency in time, we have the ability to reverse those symptoms if they reach in a timely fashion. And we do this, if they have a blockage or an ischemic kind of stroke, by either giving them the clot busting medication, or we can even go up all the way up into the artery and pull the clot out. So with both these 2 life-saving, disability-saving treatments, we can actually promise our patients that that they can get back to their lives the way they were before they had a stroke, right? And in contrast to that, we all know how if you don't get in time, you run a risk of death as well as disability over time. So that's very frightening and alarming. And it's important that because we have a time-saving treatment, we should act on it as soon as we recognize it.
Dr. Singh, we have Karen joining us now. Karen, thank you for calling Radio Noon.
Hi, good morning. Good afternoon.
I understand
Karen.
You've had 2 strokes, Karen.
Yes, I found out at my second stroke that I had a previous stroke, but no one bothered to tell me.
They found damage or something, but you didn't know about it.
Well, they had done an MRI, but they decided that I was too young of a woman to have had a stroke. This is I found out later. So they did a bunch of other tests on me, but I didn't have any of the FAST symptoms. I didn't have any face drooping, arm weakness, or speech. And the second time I did, after a while, have kind of kaleidoscope vision, but no other symptoms.
First of all, Dr. Singh, let's talk about Karen was too young. Karen, can I ask when you would have had your first stroke, or when they thought it wasn't a stroke because you were too young?
Yes, I was early 30s, early 40s rather.
Okay, and we spoke earlier just in this newscast, just in this program, with someone who was 20.
Right.
Dr. Singh, how is it new information that younger people can be having strokes? Is that something we're just learning?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair way to put it, right? So as our numbers of, as the numbers of people having stroke are increasing, we are seeing trends towards younger populations suffering from strokes. Adding another layer to it is we found that women actually have different presentations as compared to men when it comes to strokes. So it can, we found out that, the symptoms in women are more vaguer. They may not have all the signs of stroke that we see in men, which could lead to delay in diagnosis. So there is still a lot that we are learning specifically about patients who are young or folks who are young who develop symptoms of stroke, as well as women, and how their body reacts differently when they suffer from stroke.
And Karen, you said you were having kaleidoscope vision?
Yes, which was a new one on me, and I thought maybe that's vertigo because I hadn't had that before either. And so I didn't go immediately to the hospital.
What is can you describe what kaleidoscope vision feels like or looked like, Karen, to you?
It feels it's very nauseating because it feels like a screen of like a film screen is going by like you're on a carousel.
Oh dear. Yeah, that would feel nauseating, and I could see why you'd think it was vertigo of some kind.
Well, again, not knowing.
Not knowing. Well,
yeah.
you're not a neurologist. You don't have to know all these things. But Dr. Singh is. How common is that symptom?
Yeah, so it is one of the most common symptoms in women, right? Which often is most commonly misdiagnosed in. I should mention that kaleidoscopic vision in isolation may not point towards a stroke, but it is definitely a red flag when we encounter symptoms of vertigo, confusion, visual changes as a red flag for someone to screen for stroke signs and symptoms, right? So
the red flag
and these are more common in women. Yes, they
and
are.
more. Okay, we need to talk more about that because that's true in heart disease as well. That women present differently than men. What are Karen? First of all, before you leave us, are you still with us?
Yeah.
How are you now?
Oh, I'm fantastic. I mean, I still get weird things when I walk and look. I feel turn my head and I get nauseous, but it's been a relatively okay recovery.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much for calling and sharing your story.
Thank you.
Dr. Singh, let's talk then about what the signs of stroke in women are and the signs of heart attack and how they're different than men.
So as a neurologist, I can speak for signs of stroke better than heart attack. So I'm going to stick to that, to my expertise. But going back to the fast signs and the face droopiness and the arm drift and the leg weakness, and the speech problems, these are the main core signs of someone having a large stroke. And these do not differ between men and women. So if someone is having a large stroke, they are bound to have symptoms of face, arm, speech deficits. These are, I would say, 80% to 85% of all large strokes. Having said that, symptoms of minor stroke are more likely to differ between men and women. And by minor stroke, I mean these are mini strokes, smaller deficits, and they differ because, there are lots of biases here, Janet. Like there is an implicit gender bias. There is, women, as women, we tend to ignore our health in terms of, or seek medical management because of sociocultural factors, which can, and we're still studying all this, like do women seek emergency care later as compared to men? Do they go to the hospital later as compared to men? Their symptoms are different in the form they're more likely to present with dizziness, confusion, vertigo, headache, visual symptoms as compared to men, and they're more likely labeled to have a diagnosis of a migraine or a vertigo as against a stroke as compared to men, sorry. So there are, as I've mentioned, starking differences in terms of how men and women differ along the spectrum of care in the treatment of stroke. Now, there's also difference in terms of how rehab and recovery is between men and women. We are only at the very start of learning these things, and there's a lot of ongoing research, and Heart and Stroke is supporting a lot of that work to understand these differences. But I'm happy to share what we know so far with the listeners here.
Liz joins us now. Hi, Liz. Thank you for calling Radio Noon.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say that my husband had 2 strokes, and he had symptoms that weren't as common. He had some with speech and that kind of thing, but corrected with speech therapy. But his big problem was he had trouble swallowing, and this became very problematic. They took x-rays or something of his swallowing mechanism, and they couldn't fix it or anything. But it meant that he had to have a variety. We had to keep trying different purees and so on. And then he would aspirate often. So he had to have suction machines in the apartment so we could suction him often. And then about every 3 months he had to go to hospital with aspiration pneumonia to be treated. And then he'd be in 2 or 3 days, and then he'd be coming home again, and it just repeated the cycle.
The swallowing was actually a sign of a stroke?
Apparently, yes. He'd also had he had some speech and a little bit of trouble with his arm, but it was the swallowing part that for him was the worst part.
Did they recognize it as a stroke?
Well, they did initially because of the speech and a loss of coordination. His speech was all jumbled. Sudden onset. But then after, as they were treating that, it became apparent his swallowing and choking was the big problem. And they said that was due to the stroke.
Thank you for calling, Liz, and sharing that story. How often does that happen, Dr. Singh?
Very often. Very common. So, this is it's part of our treatment protocol, Janet. Like, we do not allow our patients who come in with symptoms of stroke to swallow or eat anything unless they have a formal speech language pathologist assessment. Because there are swallowing centers, there are areas in the brain, and as Liz pointed out, that there could be a loss of coordination between the musculatures in the muscles of the mouth that can affect swallowing. It increases the risk of aspiration, and by the sounds of it, there is from what Liz is saying, it could happen that the stroke can actually affect the swallowing center itself. It is not uncommon, and it is part of stroke recovery that we try to rehabilitate using our speech therapists and their expertise to overcome and override those difficulties. But it is common for us to see swallowing difficulties. Of course, when you come to the emergency, there are other obvious symptoms in form of face droopiness and not being able to move your arms and legs, which appear more prominent. But over time, we are aware that this is something that we need to keep a check on and see how it's recovering before we consider it safe for our patients to start swallowing and eating usual food.
We used to advise people to call 911 and then have the person who was having the stroke chew an aspirin. Do we still advise that?
A good question, Janet. So, it brings me to highlight the fact that there are two kinds of stroke. One is the blockage kind of stroke, which is most common. 80% of our strokes are where, there's a blockage in the artery because of a blood clot leading to decreased blood supply in the brain, which is the stroke that we're talking about. But 20% of the time, it could be the bleeding kind of stroke, which is basically there is hemorrhage in your brain. Aspirin is a blood thinner, right? So at the point where you're calling 911, we do not know whether you're having the ischemic kind of stroke or the bleeding kind of stroke. So at this point of time, unlike heart attacks, we do not recommend you taking aspirin at home. The first step would be to call 911, come immediately to the emergency so that we can do a CT scan and look in the brain and make sure that you're not bleeding before we give you any blood thinner.
There, of course, in this province, huge province, we've got lots of folks listening who live far from an emergency room, or perhaps the emergency room that's close to them is not open on the weekends, has limited hours. How big a concern is that for you?
So, of course, we are vast in our geography. But having said that, I should say that we have tele-stroke centers across the province. We have 8 tele-stroke sites, excluding outside Winnipeg, and there is a stroke neurologist who's on call 24/7, available through a video call to assess patients or Manitobans who have strokes. If they end up the emergency, our paramedics and 911 are very well aware of the hospitals which have tele-stroke capabilities. So, of course, there's room to grow. Of course, we can have more centers, but as it stands currently, there is there are pathways to for Manitobans to get timely stroke care.
And finally, I guess, what can we do, Dr. Singh, lifestyle-wise, to lessen our chance of having a stroke?
Great question, Janet. So, I think living a good lifestyle is, and when I say good and healthy, it may sound, that I'm using common language, but it is important that you exercise regularly. Smoking is a big no because it substantially increases the risk of stroke, and eating healthy diet is incredibly important as well. If you do have risk factors of stroke, such as, high blood pressure, diabetes, or high cholesterol, taking adequate, good control and taking your medications regularly is going to be, again, very important. And lastly, I would say that stroke is a treatable condition if treated in time. So recognize the fast signs of stroke, call 911 immediately, and come to the hospital to get care.
Dr. Nishita Singh, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful chatting with you.
Dr. Nishita Singh is a stroke neurologist and Heart and Stroke and Research Manitoba Chair in Clinical Stroke Research at the University of Manitoba. To comment on anything you heard here today, to keep this conversation going, remember you can leave a message for us anytime at 204-788-3797. You can also reach me on Facebook. I'm CBC Radio Noon Janet, just Radio Noon Janet. And email janet.stewart@cbc.ca.
Angeline Tadaweo hosts The Block.
Afrobeats to jazz, hip-hop to R&B, calypso, Kez the Band, Michelle Montano, Bob Marley, Bounty Killer. So we really give all these artists a chance to shine, and the key is in the programming, in making it make sense, and making sure that the music is fluid, a fluid experience.
The Block with Angeline Tadaweo. Available now on CBC Listen.
We've got music for you now from Brenton David. This is the song Honestly.
Honestly, you got a way of doing things that drives me crazy. Honey, you're underrated. Always making a statement. Like a self-fulfilling prophecy, you look at me and then I'm levitating without misbehaving. You take my boots off the pavement. I honestly don't know where I'd be if I didn't have you. I'd be a diamond ring without a finger I could slip onto. Or a big old house full of empty rooms. Man, it's got a hell of a view. But honey, here's the truth. I honestly just don't know where I would be without you. Hopefully you feel the same way about me when we're hitting 80. My old little lady. Until we're pushing up daisies. Oh, and if I go before you do, you know I'm gonna grab us a table. But it'll test my patience. But I don't mind waiting. I honestly don't know where I'd be if I didn't have you. I'd be a diamond ring without a finger I could slip onto. Or a big old house full of empty rooms. Man, it's got a hell of a view. But honey, here's the truth. I honestly just don't know where I would be without you.
Aw, Dylan, I don't want to lose this song. It's so pretty. This is the song Honestly from Manitoba-based fiddler, Americana artist, that's the style of music, Brenton David. Love this song about finding someone you want to live the rest of your years with. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Brenton David. And thank you for listening today to Radio Noon. You know, it takes a village to raise a radio program. I want to thank my village very much today. I want to thank Corey Funk, Dylan Longhurst, Travis Peterson, and Brad Lillies, who work so hard to put us up on YouTube. Thanks, folks, for watching us on YouTube and for listening to us wherever you happen to be. Thanks to Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson, and to Faith Fundal and Chloe Friesen, who are always just wonderful co-workers and neighbors at my desk. Faith takes us to air with Up to Speed at 3 o'clock today. They're going to be talking about stuff that's been dampened, the joy because of all the rain. What's impacted by all that rain? Stay with Radio 1. Unreserved is next.
$1 billion con.
It didn't take long for it to spread like wildfire,
Which destroyed lives.